are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, April 17th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into everything we're going to discuss today, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So with that being said, let's get into what we are going to discuss on today's show. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about the Cowboys. Some comments made by Stephen Jones, and we'll get into what he has to say about their offseason, why the Cowboys approached the offseason the way they did. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Patrick Mahomes and some of his comments regarding, being up there as one of the greats, the greatest of all time. So we'll get into what he had to say. Then we'll talk about some mock drafts. I know that I haven't really talked about it, but we'll get into some of the mock drafts, look at some of the experts' mock drafts like Peter Schrager, if you want to call them experts. But yeah, we'll look at Peter Schrager's mock draft, his most recent one. We'll look at some of the other mock drafts as well, and I'll give you my thoughts on them. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about a pair of quarterbacks in the AFC South. We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence and his comments on a new contract, as well as Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, talking about Anthony Richardson and his rehab from his injury that ended his season last year. So, with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Cowboys and the kind of offseason that they have had or haven't had. And we'll talk about Stephen Jones and his comments on why the Cowboys offseason was quiet. So, let's get into what exactly he had to say. So, he made an appearance on 105.3 The Fan, and this is what he had to say about the offseason that the Cowboys have had. We spent max money year in and year out. All 32 can only spend the same amount of money over a 5-year stretch. When we're all said and done, we max out our salary cap every year. We will have done that, and what comes with having a good roster, which we do, we are also looking towards signing our own guys. It doesn't mean it happens. It doesn't mean it happens overnight. But when you're wanting to sign players like Dak and Micah and CeeDee, then certainly you have to hold money back if you want to have a realistic chance of signing those guys. So, and those three guys will be looking for new contracts. And on top of that, the Cowboys didn't really have a lot of cap space going into this offseason. So, yeah, they're looking to re-sign those guys. So it really comes down to they want to bring back their 3 stars on the team. So Dak will obviously, his contract will remain unchanged for 2024, which we'll see what happens if they end up bringing him back or if he ends up leaving. I know I discussed his cap situation, even if he does leave, because the Cowboys still have a couple of years tacked onto his contract, even if he does leave as a free agent, which would cause a massive dead cap hit. And that could be a problem for the Cowboys. But again, we'll see if they end up bringing him back. Then you got CeeDee Lamb, who's going to be approaching free agency in 2025 and can potentially sign an extension sooner. Now, I talked about yesterday how he didn't attend voluntary workouts for the Cowboys. And we also did talk about in the production meeting whether he should hold out or not. And maybe he ends up doing that, because I know that's been kind of circulating around whether he should hold out or not. And that might end up being the case. Then you also have Micah Parsons, who's likely to have his fifth-year option picked up, keeping him under contract through 2025. The Cowboys could push money into the future with an extension for Lamb, but decisions may come after the draft. Cowboys are likely not finished with roster construction, but might not make big moves until after the draft. Despite the quiet offseason, the defending NFC East champions are still active in shaping their roster. Now, they actually did make a move yesterday. They signed running back Royce Freeman, who's been around for a while. He's 28 years old. They signed him to, I believe, a one-year deal. And last year with the Rams, had 319 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he's been in the league since 2018. Got drafted by the Broncos, spent some time with the Panthers, spent some time with the Texans, and then again, most recently, spent some time with the Rams. So now the Cowboys bring him in, a veteran running back. So that's what they end up doing. Instead of bringing back Zeke and or maybe Dalvin Cook. But with this move, they are still expected to, at least in an article I'm looking at right now with that has the signing, they are still expected to select a running back in the draft. So, and yeah, he was a third-round pick in 2018 with the Broncos. So, but they bring in a veteran running back. Not a splashy name, but again, somebody that provides depth. So that was another minor move that they made. But yeah, most likely they are going to address a lot of their needs in the draft, and then we'll see what they do after that. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys there, it seems from what Stephen Jones is saying that they are prioritizing, keeping all their guys. And, I've said, well, you're not going to be able to keep everybody, but maybe they can. The problem is now is if you sign all these guys, now again, they could do what they've done with Dak's contract and push the money to later years. Spread the salary cap around. They could do that. But again, it's going to be hard to, build your roster when you got 3 guys making a ton of money. And it seems that's the direction we could be going in if, with what Stephen Jones is saying ends up being true, that they want to keep all their guys. But it is going to be interesting how all this kind of unfolds here, because you got Dak, who's going to be playing Dak's going to be playing under his current contract, and they can't franchise tag him, so we'll see how those negotiations end up playing out. Then you got CeeDee Lamb, who could be holding out, so he could get his contract before Dak does, or maybe not. And then you got Micah Parsons, who eventually is going to have to get paid too. So it's they got some big decisions that they have to make, and for the Cowboys, it's kind of a big offseason for them. Well, at least from between now and at the end of 2024, because this team could be different if they have a new quarterback under center. So. And, them not making moves this offseason, again, you don't want to spend irresponsibly. You want to make smart moves. But they just didn't do anything. You signed Eric Hendricks, you re-signed your long snapper, but you did lose some guys. You lose some guys that went to Washington to play with Dan Quinn. You had to cut some guys. Guys had to retire. You cut Michael Gallup. You cut Leighton Vander Esch. So, yeah, I mean, they really did. There was more subtractions than additions. But, again, it has a lot to do with the cap situation. And, again, they want to try to, save some money so they can re-sign all their guys. They're big guys. But only time will tell what ends up happening. Like I said, it could end up being that Dak Prescott is the odd man out. And also, there's some speculation that they could draft a quarterback, which I talked about yesterday. And we'll see if they end up following through on that. Because, again, you still got Trey Lance on the roster, I believe. And, maybe the Cowboys give him a shot if Dak ends up leaving. But we'll see. I mean, Trey Lance still is only 23. And, has gotten limited playing time because he's gotten hurt. But, the Cowboys did trade for him. So he could be a backup plan in case Dak decides to leave and they can't reach a long-term deal with him. Because, that is a possibility. We never really got a fair assessment of what Trey Lance could do. And he has won games, but, again, we never really have gotten a fair assessment because he's been hurt. And, he was with the 49ers. I mean, that was a great spot for him. It's just, again, it just didn't pan out. So we'll see what ends up happening. But, yeah, I mean, the Cowboys having a quiet offseason does have a lot to do with the players that they want to keep. And that's their 3 stars, in Dak, in CeeDee, and Micah Parsons. So, and again, like I've said, I expect the Cowboys to be at least a playoff contender, be a team that, has a chance to win their division with the Eagles. But nothing more than that. I don't really expect them to go any further than the divisional round. They couldn't even get out of the first round. So that's kind of my ceiling for the Cowboys. And next week, we got the draft, which I can't even believe it's upon us. So a lot of their impactful moves are going to be through the draft. Or their, at least, additions. I mean, some of the players they get aren't going to be impactful players right off the bat. But that's where the moves are going to come from, because they still got to address the running back position. You figure I think they would draft an offensive lineman at some point, and then on defense we'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's really where their additions are going to come from, is through the draft. So we'll see what they end up doing. Obviously, you have, the first round is going to be just that one day, which is, so I think it's, so the 25th it starts. And then I think, so it's, what is it, rounds 2 through 4, I think, are the following day. And then, or maybe it's 2 through 3 on the 26th. And then the 27th is 4 through 7. I think that's what it is. But round 1 is only the first night. But, with the draft, it's just, it's kind of annoying because you just want teams to just make picks, but they got to just, take up the whole time limit, and it's just, I mean 4 through 7, the draft just flies by because, it's not as big of a spectacle as, the first 2 nights. Really, the first night. They really turned the draft into, like a show instead of just, you draft your players and that's it. But that's what the NFL does. That's what they do. But it should be exciting. And, yeah, looking forward to it. Seeing what teams do. What kind of wackiness happens if we get any, players end up getting traded. We'll see. But it should be fun. And like I said, the Cowboys, they're going to be making some... That's where their additions are going to come from, is through the draft. So we'll see what they end up doing. But yeah, they got some big decisions to make with their big guys, and we'll see if they're able to keep everybody. It's going to be tough, but let's see if they're able to figure it out. And let me know what you guys think about that. Are they going to be able to figure it out and keep their 3 stars? Let me know in the comments. So we're going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes, him talking about his legacy and consistency. We'll talk about how he stacks up among the all-time greats and what he has to do, at least what he said, what he has to do in order to get himself into that GOAT conversation. So that is what we will discuss when we come back from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes and his recent comments reflecting on his legacy and where he kind of stacks up in the GOAT conversation. So, he was named one of the world's most influential people of 2024 by Time Magazine, and of course has an incredible resume so far in his, 6-year career, 7-year career. And he has 3 Super Bowl victories, of course, 3 Super Bowl MVP awards, 2 NFL MVPs, and other accolades as well. He says, though, that he is nowhere near the greatest of all time. Now, I think he's heading in that trajectory, but yeah, I wouldn't say he's nowhere. Well, I mean, this is coming from him, though, but I wouldn't say he's nowhere near the conversation, but he's definitely working his way towards that. But he talks about how you have to build the consistency of your career. And he said, I've had at least one of the top 3 starts to a career, I'll put it that way. And he said, you have to build a consistency of a career. You see that in any sport. I've had a great run. I think I've done a great job so far. But it's hard to take away from what Tom did for so long, what Peyton Manning did, or Aaron Rodgers. There are so many guys, they were at such a high level for such a long time. In order to be in that conversation, you have to do that on a year-to-year basis. You can't take it for granted that you did it the year before. That's something I'll talk about when I'm done playing. The people who can make those decisions. So, got a lot to say there. And, I mean, he's right. I agree with him 100% that you have to be consistent, and he's been in the league since 2017. Didn't become a full-time starter until the following year after the Chiefs traded Alex Smith because he sat behind Alex Smith for a year. And since then, Patrick Mahomes has taken the league by storm and is the best quarterback in the NFL. And like I said, I don't think he's nowhere near the GOAT conversation, but he's right when he says you really have to do it over a long period of time. And I think he said the right thing there. Because you had Tom Brady, you had Aaron Rodgers, you had Peyton Manning, you had Drew Brees. All these guys, they did it for long periods of time. Longer periods of time than Patrick Mahomes' career right now. And Patrick Mahomes has to continue to play like this. And, then for him, then he would, I guess, then put himself in that conversation. But You could also look at it on the other hand, and I guess, and one quarterback that I could think of right now that he was on his trajectory, not to be like in the GOAT conversation, but definitely to be at least a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that's Russell Wilson. Look at what Russell Wilson did with Seattle all those years. He was regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Then he goes to Denver, and he has that awful first year. Was okay the second year. But now people are questioning, like, is he still a Hall of Famer? So, not saying that that's going to happen to Patrick Mahomes, this fall off, because right now there's no signs of that. And he's going to stay with the Chiefs his whole career, I would imagine. But then again, Drew Brees was with two different teams. Now, again, like once he went to the Saints, that's when his career really took off. But, Drew Brees switched teams. Aaron Rodgers switched teams. Tom Brady switched teams. Peyton Manning switched teams. So who's to say Patrick Mahomes later in his career, he doesn't switch teams? But right now, it looks like again, it's still early, but should stay in Kansas City his whole career, basically. But right now, it doesn't seem like there's any signs of Patrick Mahomes, his production dipping. Now, again, yeah, I guess for his standards, he did have a down year statistically in the regular season, but they still went on and won the Super Bowl. And it had a lot to do with the personnel around him. It didn't really have to. Yeah, he threw more interceptions. But I think we could all agree, or most people could agree, that it had a lot more to do with what he was surrounded by as opposed to it being his fault. Because they dropped a lot of passes in the regular season, the Chiefs. You also had Travis Kelce, who was playing banged up for most of the year. The Chiefs offensively had some issues. But they ultimately pulled it together, and once they got to the playoffs, they flipped that switch, and they rode that all the way to the Super Bowl, and they won it again. Now, they should be better in 2024 offensively. But again, you have this stuff going on with Rashee Rice that doesn't look good right now. Probably might not play football ever again with what's going on with him. And that's what makes the signing of Marquise Brown more important. So they're probably going to have to draft a receiver, which they were probably going to do anyways, but now that makes that more important. But I expect the Chiefs offensively to be better in 2024 over the course of the full season. And they're the team to beat. And the other thing, too, is, like, Mahomes talks about doing, being consistent over long periods of time. But in just a short period of time, like, yeah, he talks about Peyton Manning, he talks about Aaron Rodgers, and Brady, of course. But Brady has 7 rings. Aaron Rodgers only has 1, and Peyton only has 2. And Peyton Manning, his second ring, that came off of the Denver Broncos defense carrying that team to the Super Bowl and taking down the Carolina Panthers, who were 15-1 that season. That had a lot more to do with the defense than it really did with Peyton Manning. Patrick Mahomes, for the most part, he is the reason why the Chiefs... he is the reason the Chiefs have 3 Super Bowls. The defense was the strength of the team in 2023, but you go back to, the previous season against the Eagles and, when they won against the 49ers, that had a lot to do with Patrick Mahomes. They were down 10 against the 49ers the first time, and they came back. He converts that long pass to Tyreek Hill. And the Chiefs ended up just winning that game by 2 scores, because then you had Damian Williams score that touchdown at the end. But they won that. And Mahomes had an unbelievable postseason that year, because they were down 24-0 against the Texans. They came back. Then they were down 10 points to the Titans. They came back. Down 10 points to the 49ers. They came back. Then, 2022, he gets hurt in the playoff game against the Jaguars. And they still win that game. They win against the Bengals. And then, they went in a shootout against the Eagles, 38-35. And Mahomes actually didn't throw for that many yards in that game. But he had 3 touchdowns. And then, of course, you got the most recent Super Bowl. And, Mahomes plays great, of course, in that as well. Did throw an interception. But, it didn't matter. Chiefs still ended up coming out on top. Again, they got helped out by the muff punt, but still. Patrick Mahomes has, risen to the occasion in more than one instance. And now he has, 3 Super Bowls in just a short amount of time. So he talks about how, you got to be more consistent over a long period of time, but he's been really consistent in just a short amount of time, and he's got 3 Super Bowls. This is what Tom Brady was doing the first, 5 or 6 years he was the starter. Had three rings. But then he went 10 years without winning a ring. Now, could that happen to Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, times are different now. But, again, that doesn't get talked about enough, that Tom Brady went 10 years without winning a Super Bowl. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't go to a Super Bowl and he wasn't making it to the AFC Championship game, because he was still doing that. It's just he wasn't winning rings. Then the second half of the dynasty started when they played the Seahawks in 2014, 2015. And they won that. Malcolm Butler gets the pick. And then, how the rest of it goes. Wins another one. They come back against the Falcons, then wins against the Rams, then goes to Tampa and wins the Super Bowl there. So, we'll see now with Mahomes. But, again, he's taking the humble route and saying, look, I got to do it over a long period of time. He's still got years left in his career. And on top of that, let's see what he does now. Not now, but eventually. Let's see how he performs without Travis Kelce and without Andy Reid as his head coach. Because those guys are going to be on their way out at some point. Travis Kelce might end up going before Andy Reid. Because we saw some headlines that, maybe he was contemplating retirement. But, we'll see. But those guys are eventually going to leave before Mahomes. So then it's going to be different. Now, I think Mahomes will be able to handle it. But it'll be different whenever Andy Reid decides to go and whether, Travis Kelce eventually retires. It's going to be interesting. Because, that's who he's won every Super Bowl with. Is Kelce and Andy Reid. So, but, I like what Mahomes said, keeps it in perspective, hey, guys like Brady, Rodgers, Peyton, they played for a long time, and they really built up their resumes. Those are the 3 best quarterbacks of my lifetime. Mahomes is now in that. You kind of have to sub one of those guys out for Mahomes. Mahomes is already at 2. If I'm ranking the quarterbacks, at least since I started watching. Because him and Brady, between them, they got 10 rings. And, in terms of talent, I'm always going to put Aaron Rodgers at the top just because, I'm biased there. But, Mahomes already is just, he's at the top of some people's lists. Yeah, not ready to put him there yet because, again, still got to win more Super Bowls, but he could definitely do that. So, but, I know people are kind of sick and tired of the Chiefs, but really what we're watching is unbelievable. And again, they're trying to go for a 3-peat now. So if he does that, he's going to do something that no other quarterback has ever done, and that's win 3 in a row. And we'll see if they can do that. They got a great chance to. So before we go into our next break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about some mock drafts, because I know I haven't really talked about any kind of mock draft. With the draft being next week, we'll go into Peter Schrager's mock draft. We'll look at some of the other mock drafts as well, and I'll give you my thoughts on them when we come back. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to take a look at some mock drafts. We'll look at Peter Schrager's. We'll look at some of the other mock drafts as well that I have here. So this is Peter Schrager's mock draft now that we got, that I have opened up. So this is what he says here. He said, "This isn't what I would do. It's what I'm hearing from my sources around the league." So, and I think Peter Schrager is a reliable source when it comes to, all things NFL. Again, we'll see if he ends up being right. I mean, the first pick, pretty much everybody is in agreement, and that is the Bears taking Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC. I mean, there's no indication that the Bears are going to go in any other direction with that, if they're going to take another quarterback, a different quarterback. But it's going to be Caleb Williams. Then after that, it's, all right, well, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But the Bears will be getting Caleb Williams. And, again, like I've said, I think he's going to be stepping into a good situation. And, again, I know I said this on a previous show, but it's weird. It's strange saying that. It's strange if, like, a Bears fan hears me saying that, because the Bears have been a team that's, been up and down at least the last couple of years. But for a while, it's just been like, they're kind of always in the same spot. But the Bears are trending up. I do feel like they are. And I like a lot. I really do like what they have done this offseason, the moves that they've made. And I think their rookie quarterback is stepping into a good situation with the playmakers around them. You got Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, solid 1 and 2 wide receivers. Keenan Allen was a number 1 with the Chargers. Now he comes over. So you got a 1A and a 1B. Then you got Cole Kmet, who's really developed into a solid tight end. And then you got DeAndre Swift, Khalil Herbert, and Roschon Johnson coming out of the backfield. So, you got running backs, you got receivers. The offensive line probably could still use more work. The defense was improving. So, I mean, stepping into a good situation. So, we'll see what ends up happening. But so, yeah, he's got Caleb Williams going number 1. Then going to the Commanders is LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels. So, and he was the Heisman Trophy winner as well. So, it's probably going to come down to, it's going to be either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. That's probably what's going to end up happening, is either, Jaden Daniels or Drake May is going to go 2, and then the other is going to go 3. So it seems like Jaden Daniels could be the number 2 pick. Well, that's what Peter Schrager has here. And then Drake May from North Carolina, he'll go to the Patriots at 3. Because, again, these are 2 teams that need quarterbacks. The Commanders, they signed Marcus Mariota. They traded Sam Howell. So Marcus Mariota could be the bridge guy because he has been that in the past. He was with that with the Falcons with Desmond Ridder, but Desmond Ridder is clearly not the guy, and now he's in Arizona. So, yeah, that ended up not working out. But we could see a similar situation like that play out in Washington where he is the starter, and then they transition to the rookie guy, depending on who that is. So those are the next 2 picks here. You got Jane Daniels at 2, and then Drake May will be going to the Patriots. Again, the Patriots are another team that needs a quarterback. They have other issues as well, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. They lack playmakers on that side of the ball. But they need a quarterback because they traded away Mac Jones, and Bailey Zappi is not it. But they did bring in Jacoby Brissett. So, again, Jacoby Brissett could also be that bridge guy. I'm not going to go through the entire mock draft. I'm probably going to just go through at least the first 10 picks. But this is what he has now happening at pick number 4. So the Cardinals have the number 4 overall pick, but he has the Giants trading up and drafting J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. And at least here, where I am, doesn't seem like that many people are high on J.J. McCarthy. Well, at least here on the East Coast. And yeah, I mean, you look at the national championship game, and you had Michigan just. They were talking about this on the Michael Kay show, because they were talking about J.J. McCarthy, and just Michael Kay was saying how he just doesn't see how J.J. McCarthy is that guy, and they were talking about the national championship game and just how many times Michigan ran it, because Michigan ran the ball for whatever it was, 250 yards or close to whatever. It was somewhere around there, and I know they were having the discussion of, well, was it more of they just wanted to stick with the run, or they just really did not want McCarthy throwing? And yeah, I think it had I think we could all, or most people can agree that it had a lot more to do with the game plan. That, hey, this is working, why are we going to stop it? I mean, you look at the 49ers and what they did to the Packers in the NFC Championship game with Raheem Mostert running for 200 yards, and Garoppolo only threw the ball, 8 times? It was something like that. It was something ridiculous. So, yeah, it's like, if it's working, let's keep doing it. Now, again, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on all these guys. But, people are talking about how he had a great pro day. And, again, all of these guys have one thing in common. They have not taken a snap in the NFL. It's going to be a lot different. And that's when you could really evaluate how a player is how they translate to the NFL. Because, again, people think J.J. McCarthy, I see the comments on social media, he could be Zach Wilson 2.0. Zach Wilson had a great pro day, but how did that translate to the NFL? Not so great. But it also depends on the kind of system you end up in. Because Zach Wilson ended up with the Jets, that wasn't a good situation for him. And if he ended up somewhere else with a team that could really develop a quarterback, maybe he'd be a better quarterback. I don't know. But, J.J. McCarthy to the Giants, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. But it could be a smokescreen, because, again, Joe Shane was saying how, everyone expects them to take a quarterback, but maybe they stay at 6 and they take a wide receiver. We'll see. But we'll find out next week what they end up doing. But for me, I think the Cardinals stay at the number 4 overall pick, and they take a receiver because they need one for Kyler Murray. But Peter Schrager does have here, they get the 6th overall pick. I mean, you still could get a top receiver. Now, he has Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Chargers then at pick number 5 because the Chargers need receivers. Their receiver depth is thin. And then the Cardinals end up with Rome Odunze from Washington. So the Cardinals still end up getting a receiver. But ends up not being Malik Neighbors. he's got Rome Odunze being his number 2 receiver that ends up getting taken. So that's interesting because I know most people would have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors at the 1 and 2, but Rome Odunze, at least here, he has him going at number 6. Got the Titans taking Joe Alt from Notre Dame, the tackle, who's the best tackle in the draft. I think that's what most people are saying. So that would be good. You get someone to protect Will Levis. Again, they surrounded Will Levis with playmakers this offseason. I mean, you bring in Tony Pollard. You bring in Calvin Ridley. You still got DeAndre Hopkins. So, I mean, again, the offense would probably look better if it was a couple of years ago, but they have surrounded Will Levis with talent. You go and draft him the best lineman or the best tackle in the draft. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. Then at pick 8, he's got the Falcons taking Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. I think their first pick's probably going to be defense, because offensively, you got a lot of weapons, and you got Kirk Cousins. So now it's you want to load up on defense as well. Actually has the Colts trading up, getting Malik Neighbors at pick number 9, trading with the Bears. So, and you know what, the Colts could probably use another receiver. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. The Bears, I think, might stay there, but we'll see. They got then he's got Brock Bowers going to the Jets from Georgia. Another weapon. I know when I was talking to my coworkers last night, who are Jet fans, I said, like, oh, who do you think the Jets are going to pick? Or who do you want the Jets to pick? And they said offensive line. But we'll see if they end up doing that or if they end up taking another weapon. They got the Vikings taking a corner, so that's interesting. I see the Vikings, but I mean, at least here Schrager says that doesn't mean that Minnesota's done with the quarterback room. I guess maybe because they take one maybe later in the draft, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sam Darnold is not the answer. So yeah, they got. So he's got them taking Terrion Arnold from Alabama, the corner. Then he's got the Broncos taking the edge rusher Latu. I hope that's how you pronounce it. That's from UCLA. Then he has the Raiders taking. I can't pronounce this name. This is from Penn State. The tackle Aluminurwa Fashanu. I apologize if I just cannot pronounce that name. But yeah, the Penn State tackle. So we'll see if they end up doing that. Then you got the Saints taking a tackle from Oregon State, Talise Fuaga. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I'm gonna just keep saying that for like every name that I just have no idea how to pronounce, and the names names don't get easier. Then the Bears, they have taking tackle from Alabama, J.C. Latham. Then with the Seahawks, he has him from taking the lineman from Washington, Troy Fautanu. I'm just not gonna say the names anymore. Jacksonville, Quinion Mitchell. They got him the corner from Toledo. Yeah, I apologize for this is terrible. I should have looked into these names before doing the show, but yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole mock draft, but they actually have the Steelers taking Brian Thomas Jr. at 20, or he has them taking him. With the Bengals, Brian Murphy, the second defensive tackle from Texas. The Rams, he has them taking a tackle from Oklahoma, Tyler Guyton. Actually has the Vikings. He has the Vikings taking Bo Nix. So maybe they do end up getting the quarterback. I had to just go through the mock draft more. Jared Verse for the Dolphins, an edge rusher from Florida State. Cooper DeJean from Iowa, the defensive back. Actually has the Cowboys getting Xavier Worthy from Texas. wide receiver. Then with the Packers, he has them taking Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia. With the Bucks, Graham Barton from Duke, an offensive lineman. The Cardinals at 27, he has them taking Darius Robinson from Missouri, a defensive lineman. He's got the Bills taking a receiver, Adonai Mitchell from Texas. Then he has the Lions taking Zach Frazier, an interior offensive lineman from West Virginia. With the Ravens, he's got him taking Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, the corner. 49ers, he's got them taking Ladd McConkey from Georgia. And then the Chiefs, he's got them taking Jalen Polk from Washington, the wide receiver. Okay, so that's the first round. Okay, and I know I said I wasn't going to pronounce any more names, but the names did get a little easier after that. So that's Peter Schrager's mock draft for the first round. And again, apologize for the mispronunciation of a lot of the names. That's my bad. But I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. It's hard to really predict how a draft is going to go. I mean, you could probably guess the first, couple of picks, but then after that, it's, you kind of just throw your hands up I'm just guessing. So, but we'll see if Peter Schrager ends up being correct on some teams trading up. And again, he has the Vikings taking Bo Nix from Oregon, so we'll see if, again, that ends up happening. But, let me know what you guys think about Peter Schrager's mock draft. You can find it on NFL.com. So, let me know if it's accurate or if there's some disagreements. Again, I don't think some of the trades I don't think the Giants are going to trade up. But we'll see. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we will talk about a couple of quarterbacks from the AFC South. We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence, and we'll talk about Anthony Richardson as well. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're going to talk about a pair of AFC South quarterbacks. We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence as well as Anthony Richardson. Different topics when talking about these two guys. We'll talk about Trevor Lawrence and his contract talks, as well as Anthony Richardson's recovery from his season-ending shoulder injury from last year and how he's recovering from that. So, first we'll talk about Trevor Lawrence. So, he has had contract talks with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but says that is not his focus. I do have the direct quotes from him, so I'll read them to you from the article that I was reading on that. So, this is what he said. There's definitely been some conversations as far as where that's at now. It's not really my focus. I'd love to obviously be a Jag for as long as possible. We love it here, and I love where we're headed as an organization and feel like I'm just getting better. My best ball is definitely ahead of me from that standpoint. Obviously, yeah, that would be great, but like I said, going into my fourth year, it's not like this is necessarily going to be my last season. It's not really my focus right now. At the end of the day, my job isn't going to change whether I get extended or not before this season. My job is to go out, win games, and to be the best I can be for the team so we can have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Even if I get the contract extension, that's still my job, even more so. That's even more expectation and pressure on that. For me, I have the same focus and the same mindset. You have to just use it, so that's what I plan to do from last season. I think our approach as a team, too, it's a waste if you don't use it. You went through that experience and then you don't use it. It's double bad because it sucked going through it and you didn't get better from it. I think that's our mindset. That's my mindset moving forward. And so many things to learn from. So that's talking about the collapse from last year. Then he goes on and talks about Josh Allen's contract extension. And then the last thing he said here, I can't lie, obviously it'd be nice to have that done and feel good about it, but no, it's not really the focus right now. I know where we're at, I know where we're headed, and I know what I have to do. I know there's some improvements that I have to move going forward. So, yeah, he had a lot to say there, and yeah, I mean, he's going about it from the standpoint of, yeah, like, that would be great, but right now we got other things to worry about. I want to go out there and win games, and you know, the Jags are looking to bounce back from last year because, I mean, again, I said it. I thought they had the division locked up. I thought it was over. And, you know, especially after they won against the Texans in Houston, you thought that was it. But they just kind of fell apart, you know, and a lot of it did have to do with Trevor Lawrence getting hurt. But you could, I mean, throughout the season, you could tell, like, the Jags were kind of, you know, trying to work some things out on offense. You know, consistency was a problem for them last year. And they were searching for that. And you had Travis Etienne got off to a great start. But then, you know, as the season went on, didn't have as many big games as he did earlier in the year. He had that. Then on top of that, he had Trevor Lawrence struggling and then getting hurt. Yeah, it just the season ended with the thud, and 2024 is a big year because there's still there's some people that still need to see more from Trevor Lawrence, and I think this is a big year for him because I think he's got to go out there and prove some doubters wrong. I think he is the guy in Jacksonville, but now he's got to go out there and have a good 2024. And on top of that, you know, if they don't do good, well, Doug Peterson's definitely out. Because, I mean, you know, you have a collapse last season, and now if you go into 2024 and, you know, the team ends up continuing that trend, then, yeah, he's probably going to be out of a job. And the division's going to be tougher this year. You got the Texans and all the moves they made. The Colts, we'll talk about Anthony Richardson in a second. They're not going to go away. They're a team that was close to making the playoffs. Missed it by a game. And, again, look at the Titans as probably the last place team, but the Titans also beat the Jags. They beat them in the last week of the regular season. They split. So, and you figure they're going to be a little bit better because they took Ridley away from Jacksonville and brought him into Tennessee. So, you figure they're going to be better too. So, Jacksonville, this is a big year for them. You know, they got a division that's going to be very competitive, which at one point people looked at that division as, you know, maybe being one of the worst, but now you look at them and maybe being one of the best. Well, I wouldn't say they're one of the best, but they're better. One of the better divisions. Because I think you're going to have Jacksonville competing. You're going to have, well, the Texans right now are the favorites. You got the Colts who are going to be competing as well. And the Titans, probably that last place team, but they're not, I don't think they're bad, but they're probably that's how I would rank them. Probably say the Texans. Then Colts, Jags is kind of like a toss-up, and then the Titans. But again, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, 2024 is a big year for them. They want to prove the doubters wrong. And Trevor Lawrence definitely wants to prove the doubters wrong. But again, if he goes out if he has a bad year, then, you know, again, Jacksonville might have to have some conversations on whether he's a quarterback moving forward. But you look at the playmakers around him. Now, Travis Etienne is one of the better running backs in the NFL. But then you look at the receivers. You got Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and they brought in Gabe Davis. They don't really have a number one wide receiver. Now, Christian Kirk is getting number one wide receiver money. But, you know, they kind of need that number one wide receiver. They don't really... Now, I don't think the receivers they have are bad, but you don't have that number one wide receiver. But, And then you have Evan Ingram, of course, as well, who's, really had kind of a renaissance of a career with them, because with the Giants, he saw the talent, but he was very frustrating. As a Giant fan, very frustrating to watch. Because you see the talent, but he just wasn't able to put it together in New York. Then he goes to Jacksonville, and he's been a different player. So, again, we got the draft coming up, so we'll see what Jacksonville does in that. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, this is going to be a big year for them. And, hopefully their offense can find that consistency. And we see more of the Jaguars from from 2022, and more from the team that was 8-3, not the team that collapsed at the end of the year. So now let's get into Anthony Richardson. So he's recovering well after shoulder surgery, and Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Colts, stated that Richardson is in a really good spot, and his shoulder is feeling good. Richardson will participate in practice, but will have limitations and be monitored to ensure he doesn't overexert himself. The decision to shut down Richardson early for surgery was made with the future in mind, and he's now progressing well. Richardson's competitiveness might lead him to push himself in workouts, but the team will monitor his progress closely. It's significant for Richardson to be back with his teammates, especially after watching from the sidelines, after the surgery and, the injury. Richardson is familiar with the team's terminology and is mentally preparing for the upcoming season. Despite the injury setback, Richardson remains a cornerstone of the Colts' future, and the team is optimistic about his progress. Now, they also did bring in Joe Flacco as an insurance policy for Richardson if he does get hurt again. And Joe Flacco, did play well with the Browns last year. So, if he ends up getting hurt, the Colts, with Jonathan Taylor running the football and some good young receivers, I think, you don't want to see Flacco, but Flacco would be stepping into a good situation if knock on wood, as long as Anthony Richardson, knock on wood, doesn't get hurt. But let's go to the direct quotes from Steichen. So, yeah, he said he's in a really good spot, had really good discussions that I'll obviously keep private, but he's in a really good spot. Shoulder's feeling good, should be good to go for practice like we talked about earlier. He'll be out there throwing, but we'll limit. We'll obviously monitor it, make sure we're smarter with that, but he's in a really good place. So that's encouraging to hear. He said, he's a competitor. I think most guys that are competitors that want to be great are going to want to push themselves, but again, we're just going to have to monitor, and we'll go from there. So, yeah, it's encouraging. He's in a good spot, and they just don't want to push him. They want to bring him along slowly because, again, he's a big part of their future, and, I want to see what he could do over the course of a full season because, the first couple of games, the games that he played in, he was electric. And, the Colts need that because it's been rough looking for that replacement for Andrew Luck, who actually was asked about, potentially coming back. So maybe we could do a segment on that at some point this week. I don't expect it to happen, but that's another quarterback that was asked about maybe coming back. But yeah, you go from Luck, then you had Jacoby Brissett start for the full year, and the Colts were like okay, but they didn't make the playoffs. Then you had Phillip Rivers. He came in, Colts made the playoffs, but they lost to the Bills. Then the following year you had Carson Wentz, and it looked like the Colts were going to make the playoffs, but then you had that awful game against Jacksonville, and they missed out. Then they brought in Matt Ryan, and that didn't really work out. And then they went and drafted Anthony Richardson, and he gets hurt, and then he had Gardner Minshew step in, and they just missed the playoffs. But now you're hoping that Anthony Richardson comes back, and now Minshew's not there anymore. He's with the Raiders, but now you're hoping that Anthony Richardson comes back, and he's that electric player that he was before he got hurt, and you just hope that he doesn't get hurt. So, and again, with this division, it's going to be very competitive. Right now, you look at the Texans as the favorites. So these two quarterbacks right here, they got some things to prove in 2023, and they got to or 2024, and they got to try to take down C.J. Stroud and the Texans because right now they're the favorites and they are the defending AFC South champs, and they only got better this offseason. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how these teams match up against each other. in 2024. It should be a lot of fun. But yeah, encouraging news for Anthony Richardson and Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, again, the contract will be great, but he's focused on winning games in 2024. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Really flew by, as it always does. Again, apologize for the mispronunciation of some of the prospects in the draft. I know, like, when I hear the names being called next week, I'm gonna be like, man, I was way off with some of the pronunciations. But that's what happens. Again, like, I'm not a full-on expert on some of the prospects, but yeah. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Again, like I always say, make sure to tune into the other shows here on the network as well, because we got other stuff going on outside of football. NBA playoffs. You had some of the play-in games last night. The Western Conference play-in games. The Eastern Conference games are tonight. So make sure to tune into the basketball podcast for that, and the sports podcast as well. Obviously, tune in for baseball. Also, wrestling. Late at night. I know Eric always gives us shout-outs, and I appreciate that. So make sure to check out his show. His show is late, but he's in a different time zone, so that's why his show is super late. For an East Coast guy. But yeah, make sure to check out all the other shows on the network. We got some other shows that'll be starting as well. We got a soccer podcast starting soon, and a women's sports podcast as well. So that's all going to be coming up soon. So yeah, a lot of shows. Make sure to give them some love. And yeah, so with that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Obviously, we'll be back again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't